Every day, people come up to me and say, I know, storytelling, we're supposed to be telling stories, but how do we make a story really great? What's an example of the best kind of story? And one of the things I start talking about is the importance of making a story relatable. By making a story relatable, you create a space for your donor to step in and become part of that story. What happens then? Their heart's all in, and you're going to raise a lot more money. So how do we make a story relatable? I'm going to give you 5 tips. Probably lots more, but if you use these 5, you're going to start raising more money. Number 1, tell the story of one person. Just one person. Science has shown us that our brains can't compute big numbers. Lots of research out there. One example, researchers put together 3 stories. One was all about hunger and malnutrition in sub-Saharan Africa, the millions and millions of people impacted, a huge issue, something we should pay attention to for sure. In the second scenario, they told the story of one little 7-year-old girl who was hungry, and they surrounded it with the context, so the stats backed up what she was experiencing. She was just one of millions of children suffering and hungry. In the third instance, they told just the story of the 7-year-old girl, just her story with no bigger context. Guess which version of the story raised twice as much as the others? The story of the one little girl. They went further, they added her brother. Donations went down. The story of one is something we can relate to. It's just how we're hardwired. We can't relate to bigger numbers. A relatable story is the story of one person. And just a tip, the details of that one person can be important too. So if you're an organization where you need to kind of make up the name or add a name to the name of your storyteller, let's say you're a crisis line, for example, and it's completely anonymous, and you want to tell an example story. Do you tell the story of little Jasmine spelt with a Y? Maybe not. Is that going to be relatable to your average 75-year-old female reader, donor? Maybe not. She probably doesn't know that many Jasmines spelled with a Y. What about using a name like Emily or Matthew? One of those time-tested names that we've been using for generations. She may then think about her grandchild. She may think of her brother. She may think of herself. Tip number 2. Be thoughtful about the subject of your appeal. What do I mean by that? Here's an example. Let's say you're in healthcare. You have an urgent need for funds to help support diabetes research. Great. Do you go out with that story? You also have a story of someone who experienced cardiac arrest, had a heart attack. Maybe you have a third story, a woman who survived breast cancer. Which story is going to be more relatable? Diabetes, cardiac, or cancer? Probably not diabetes. Think about what the donor is going to relate to. Everybody knows someone who has cancer. I'd go out with that. It may not be your most urgent need, but it's going to be the most relatable story, and I promise it's going to raise more money than if you talk about diabetes or some rare disease that hardly anyone suffers from. Play on a donor's own autobiography. What does that mean? Well, take them on a walk down memory lane. Here's an example. Let's say you're a college and you're raising funds for a new lab. Your appeal is going out to alumni in that particular science program. You might say something like, remember walking into the lab on that first day of school, seeing the test tubes, the excitement that build, so much learning in front of you. Paint them a picture so they can imagine themselves as part of the story. Use that walk down memory lane. Or shared experience. That can be another way to make a story relatable. Here's an example. I'm an environmental charity. I'm a program officer. let's say I'm interested in birds and species and preservation conservation. I might start a letter saying something like, as I sit here at my desk, I can hear the chickadees in the tree outside. I can hear the wind whistling through the branches of the oak tree around the corner. Paint a picture and create something in the reader's imagination that they can be a part of. They've heard a bird chirp before. They've heard what the wind sounds like as it rustles through the leaves of a tree. And finally, number 5, choose your storyteller wisely. Again, I'll give you a concrete example. Let's say you have a bequest. You've received a bequest or a bequest intention from the 22-year-old CEO of a startup company who's a multimillionaire. He's put $10 million in his will for your charity. Fantastic. You're probably inclined to let's get that story out, get more $10 million gifts. But does that person represent your average donor? No, really highly unlikely. What about telling the story of a 70-year-old retired school teacher who's left a bequest in her will? Don't put the amount. Let the donor fill in that blank. It's a person just like them, just an average person, a peer. That's going to make your story much more relatable and much less chance of the donor seeing this story and immediately turning off because it's absolutely unrelatable to their own experience. If you use these 5 ways of making a story more relatable, I guarantee that your donor is going to see themselves as part of the story and, even more important, part of the solution. And you're definitely going to raise more money. Thanks for watching.